I released an EP every month for 12 months. This was my big idea. It was around March 2023. I think I had the idea and decided to seriously pursue it. And then I said to myself, hey Matt, do you know what would be a good idea? How about you release a single in between each of those EPs? So that roughly worked out as a single every 2 weeks. That won't be overwhelming. That's a good idea, right? Why do it? Well, I'm a media composer. I'm coming back to pursuing this career seriously. I met an issue almost immediately. Having done some previous short films in the past, I don't have a show reel. I don't really have music out at all under my own name for anyone to go, there's Matt, let's go listen to his music. How does anyone even trust I could do what they need them to do, you know? The other factor, I don't even know if I can meet deadlines that directors, game developers need to have their trust in me to meet. I've not done that in, I think it was about 2-3 years since I did a short film. That's not to say in those years of not pursuing the career I wasn't making music. Making music has never stopped for me. I've always done it, and my music routine in early 2023, probably 2022, was create music, find it really interesting, get really into it, mix it, go get some mix references, check it in the car, come back, do a master as well as I can from home, and whatever that means. You know what I'd do with it? It'd sit on my hard drive and just take up storage until I'm archiving a year later and go, shit, that's never seen the light of day. So in between not pursuing media composing as a career, I had a sort of semi-successful podcast with two of my other friends. I know that's shocking, a white man having a podcast. Surprise, surprise.
Surprise, surprise. Surprise, surprise.
But it was sort of successful, called an Earful podcast, and what we would do is we would interview artists, talk about the creative process. And something we found out with the podcast, as everyone is aware by now, you are rewarded for consistency. If you're consistently uploading, you are hitting algorithms, all they want is content anyway, stay on their platforms, blah blah blah. That's what we did, and we got some good results. So my thought was, why not treat that consistency and meeting those deadlines like we did with the podcast episodes with my own music? And that's how this all came to be. As I mentioned, I had a bunch of tracks just aging like milk on my hard drive, and I didn't realise it at the time until a friend pointed out. If I make a couple of tweaks, they sort of got a similar theme. So I was already sat on about 2 EPs without me realising. I made some changes, wanted to make sure they flowed from track to track and made sense narratively, although I don't think that was at the forefront of my mind at the beginning of this. It certainly became that way as we got further into EPs. So creating these new EPs was challenging for myself. I've never added limitations or thought how tracks flow into one another, and just like any composer, what I did for these was treat them as I was scoring something. So that was either by short films I watched and found interesting, short stories I read. It was also, inspired by films, books, art, but I made sure to write a short little story for each one of them. This is never anything for me to go, I'm going to pursue and publish, but what that did was refine my direction. If I was scoring a horror 80s slasher film, I don't think I was putting acoustic guitar in there. You get what I'm saying? That might be cool and that might be a direction to go down, but it decided factors for me. Tempo, instrumentation straight away, and then I just sort of latched onto either interesting textures or elements that steered me in a direction straight away, and this I think was fundamental in helping me get the ball moving, as well as having the 2 EPs as the sort of a head start on it all. That was a big factor. So the first few releases I put out into the void and did the usual thing that everyone does, post it on social media, get 3 likes, and then be like, why is no one listening to my music? So obviously I realized some marketing needs to happen. I did try services like Submit Hub, Groover, Daily Playlists was another one, I believe. Some of these are paid services, if you don't know, where they give you the option to pitch to playlists if it suits what they are looking for. This wasn't for every month. I did it for a few releases, and I've had some success with it and some not so successful pitches as well. Another thing I tried that I didn't know was a thing until doing this was Bandcamp codes. Putting an EP up on Bandcamp and then giving away codes for free for people to check out, sharing them in places like Reddit, really beneficial. Okay, so I'm gonna go quick fire through the EPs, give you a quick rundown of each one and the main inspirations for them. The Others EP was a sci-fi score to an alien invasion coming to Earth. Kenopsia was a sci-fi Blade Runner-esque exploration of an alien planet. The Endless Voids Part 1 and 2 EPs, this was scoring grief and the loss of a family member and a friend. These EPs were inspired a lot by Nine Inch Nails' The Downward Spiral album, as well as some Nine Inch Nails ambient work they do. Final Girl EP landed in October, and this was inspired heavily by John Carpenter. It was a synthwave-esque EP for Slasher. Onism EP was an ambient space exploration EP, exploring the feelings and emotions of being lost and alone in space, a la Sandra Bullock. The Empty Unknown EP was inspired by John Carpenter's The Thing, as well as Ennio Morricone's score for it, and also lightly inspired by the novella Who Goes There by John W. Campbell. The Forever Ago EP, this was sort of a neoclassical EP of piano works that I began collecting throughout doing this, so just on the side. This was inspired by some Nine Inch Nails piano tracks, Joet Beving. Titan EP was a sci-fi synth-driven EP inspired by Blade Runner and the game Lethal Company, which was hugely popular at the time. The Forest EP was an ambient exploration of being lost in the woods in sort of another world. Hark and Omen were both folk horror-esque EPs inspired by UK horror films such as The Witch, The Ritual. There's also some inspirations from X-Files episodes. Okay, let me be honest here for a minute. It's all well and good, this video and me going month to month going, I did this, I did that. But actually month to month during the time doing it, I did note my moods and feelings about releases. Fluctuated. High of like, we had a few listeners to why is no one listening? Is it shit? What's the fucking point? Not to sound too pessimistic, but what I noticed during my time doing this was I was starting to care about numbers, analytics, just like everyone else does. Very easy to fall into the bigger number, better person outlook. However, what I should have been looking at during that time was, hey, these tracks I would not have made if I hadn't added these limitations for an EP, and if I did, they'd just be sat on a hard drive anyway. At least I'm putting music out. So before going into this, I set myself some goals. These were, in hindsight, probably small goals, but these were done to keep me going, to make sure I met some of these that may have been very easy to hit, but at the time they didn't feel easy to hit. It felt like a mammoth task just putting a track out, let alone aiming for X amount of followers, listeners, whatever that may be. Here are the goals. I was aiming to release an EP every month for 12 months, gain 200 monthly listeners, those were Spotify listeners, I should say, gain 20 Spotify followers, hit 50 YouTube subscribers, and score a short film in the space of the 12 months. Some of them I think are doable, and others I thought were overly ambitious at the same time. Well, we know I did hit an EP every month for 12 months, as well as a single in between. I did gain 200 monthly listeners. I believe I hit that on the 29th of October 2023, so 4 months after releasing the first EP. This actually grew much larger than I intended. I think we put a bit too much focus on monthly listeners, but it's also an analytic that people use to see how serious an artist is or popular. It's a popularity thing, I think. But it did peak about 2,812 monthly listeners, which was crazy. And again, I believe that was due to the Submit Hub Groover playlist I may have pitched to. I did hit 20 followers on Spotify on the 12th of April 2024. As far as YouTube subscribers, we did hit 50. I don't have the date when we did, but we're currently at 60 at the time of me recording this, which is amazing, especially since what I would post was mainly synth jams. I began doing breakdowns of like, here's this Fractured Sounds Moonlight VST I really like, it sounds amazing. I did begin doing some track breakdowns of my favorite tracks I released on the EP and sort of going track by track, breaking down my process and the thoughts of it. I really enjoyed doing them. I probably will do more. While I didn't score a short film in those 12 months like I set in the goals at the beginning of this, I think that was maybe my most ambitious goal set. The amount of music to create for 12 EPs over a year, I underestimated. Adding scoring a short on top of that, I think way out my depth at the time. Now, while I didn't score a short, I have got on a project that I'm working on that I feel very passionate about. I'm excited to share. Did I learn anything? I'll keep it short, but yeah, I learned that creativity isn't infinite. It's not a switch you can just turn on and go for it, you know? It doesn't always hit. You're not always feeling it. You've got to make sure you're sitting down and at least giving yourself the option. Giving myself the limitations of the short stories I set for each EP helped me get a direction quicker than I've ever created anything, and that was essential because I didn't have a lot of time to create these EPs. Another thing they did is it forced me not to overthink the projects at all. I think keeping it simple was key, as well as I didn't have time to overthink. There was a time limit for my deadlines, which I think is a factor. If I didn't have that time limit, those deadlines, I likely would have just put it off and gone, well, I'm not feeling it. So looking at the overall 12 months, this is June 2023 to July 2024. July because I think the last EP sort of lined up there. We had 11,191 listeners and totaled 21,000 streams on Spotify, beyond what I thought I would ever be able to achieve, which is amazing. I did have a couple of tracks actually, picked up by Spotify Radio. I think this was maybe the most surprising. Those tracks did far better than any pitch to playlists did. However, they are some of the same songs I did pitch to playlists, so is it chicken and the egg thing? What came first? You know, did Spotify Radio go, oh, that was picked up on this playlist and is doing very well, we'll put it to Spotify Radio? I don't know. I also noticed Daylist is doing very well recently. It's not something I pushed or pursued. I don't know how that works, but very cool. So those achievements were only Spotify. We did get some Shazam numbers on Apple Music, but at the time I was using Spotify, so those were the metrics I was sort of comparing and understanding better than any other platform. I was also surprised, you know, looking at achievements, I had people buy my EPs and discography, and that was all on Bandcamp. That blew me away because that's never anything I expected to happen. So if you picked up the EPs or the discography, a huge thank you. It was not something I ever expected to happen setting out doing this, but it felt great and a big motivator. There's people just collecting tracks and, you know, seeing value in them. That's amazing. So would I do it again? Well, I've just spoke about tracks being sat on my hard drive doing nothing but gathering dust for maybe 2 friends to ever hear, to more work than I think I've produced in 12 months, as well as sharing it, and it feels complete. It feels it's there for anyone to discover. So yes, I would definitely do it again. I'm not saying indefinitely, I'm not sadistic. I think it's beneficial in short bursts and as an exercise. Something else I wanted to mention is this isn't for everyone. I'm not saying I did this, you should go do it. Get up at 5 a.m, rise and grind. What I'm saying is this worked for me and it was really beneficial. I've created more music than I ever have. I've themed it, which is something I never did when creating music in the past, which I think will give me a better approach to media composing in the future. So if my tracks resonate with one person, inspire them to do anything creative for themselves, then it's done its job. It's released into the world for other people to discover and explore. That's great. So 62 tracks, 12 singles and 12 EPs, more music than I've ever created in the space of 12 months. So I felt it pushed me creatively. I think if I were to do it again, I would vary up my genre. I had a lot of repeat genres such as sci-fi, horror, and drama. Those are my favorites. If you can't tell, I've been putting off making this video for about 6 months. I was supposed to release this around the end of the releases of the EPs, so July, August time, but sitting down in front of a camera is terrifying to me. So hopefully we're going to get past that and you'll see a lot more of me sat here or doing a track breakdown soon. So that's all there is for this video. If you have any questions about the process, anything I didn't cover, I'd love to chat about it. Go into finer detail, then let me know. Thanks for watching. That's what people say, right?